Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Russian President Vladimir Putin, two leaders bound by history, strategy, and a complicated present, locked in a warm hug at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin. To the world, it looked like a friendly gesture, but to those who follow geopolitics closely, it carried the weight of 1,000 messages. That hug, captured by cameras and shared across social media, was more than just optics. It was a signal that even in a fractured world order, India and Russia still trusted each other enough to show closeness on the world stage. For India, this moment was not just about friendship. It was about balance, survival, and leadership in an increasingly divided world. Hours later, Modi shared the image on X, writing simply, "Always a delight to meet President Putin." The words were diplomatic, but the timing was deliberate. The hug happened just before the two leaders were scheduled to hold private talks that would touch upon energy, defense, trade, and the uncertain path of global politics in the age of Donald Trump's America. Then came the moment that defined the summit. As leaders prepared to move between venues, Putin made an unusual request. He asked Prime Minister Modi to ride with him, not in India's car, not in a standard convoy vehicle, but inside Russia's own state limousine. As per reports, Putin even delayed his departure for nearly 10 minutes, waiting for Modi to join him. What followed was almost an hour-long ride, a conversation with no diplomats, no translators, no official note-takers, just two leaders sitting face-to-face in a moving fortress. Why does this matter? Because in geopolitics, car rides like this are never casual. They are deliberate. They are designed for confidentiality, for candor, for trust. Inside that limousine, away from every camera and every microphone, Modi and Putin spoke freely. While the exact topics remain unknown, observers suggest their conversation could have covered defense, energy, multipolarity, and global trade tensions. It showed that Russia saw India not as just another partner, but as a voice worth confiding in. And for India, it was a reminder that Moscow still valued New Delhi as a central player in a changing world. For a long time, Russia was lukewarm about the SCO. Moscow preferred its own alliance, the Collective Security Treaty Organization, or CSTO, a NATO-style grouping of former Soviet states. Through the CSTO, Russia dominated Central Asia, but the Ukraine war changed everything. With Russian forces stretched thin, Moscow failed to come to the aid of allies like Armenia or Kyrgyzstan when they were attacked. Trust in the CSTO collapsed. Armenia began moving away, and others stopped participating in joint drills. The CSTO was left hollow, and suddenly the SCO, once dismissed as a Chinese-led experiment, became Moscow's fallback. For India, this shift was crucial. Unlike the CSTO, where New Delhi had no seat, the SCO offered India direct access to Central Asia, to Russia, and to China, all within one framework. And at Tianjin in 2025, India's role was impossible to ignore. Yet beneath the smiles and photo ops, tensions ran deep. China, the host of the summit, was eager to project solidarity with India and Russia, but New Delhi remained cautious. The wounds of Galwan in 2020 were not forgotten. Years had passed since an Indian prime minister last visited China, and trust was still fragile. Behind closed doors, Modi reportedly raised the issue of cross-border terrorism and the need for both nations to confront extremist networks. He also pitched for India-China cooperation on issues where both countries were victims, like cybercrime and narcotics. But then, almost as soon as the summit ended, China revealed its hand. Xi Jinping met with Pakistan's army chief, General Asim Munir. Not the prime minister, not the civilian leadership, but the military strongman who truly holds power in Islamabad. The message was clear. For Beijing, Pakistan also remains the frontline partner. Projects under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor would be upgraded. Chinese investments would flow, but in return, Pakistan was expected to guarantee the safety of Chinese nationals and projects. For India, this was no surprise, but it was a reminder. Even as China posed with India at summits, it continued to arm and embolden Pakistan. And through Pakistan, it found ways to counterbalance New Delhi's rise. This is perhaps why Putin's private car ride invitation mattered so much. The SCO is not alone in this geopolitical theater. It overlaps with BRICS, another grouping where India sits with Russia, China, and others. Like the SCO, BRICS began as an economic club, but evolved into a platform to challenge Western dominance. Over the years, BRICS expanded, South Africa in 2010, and more recently Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the UAE, and Indonesia by 2025. Talk of a BRICS currency, or a financial system independent of SWIFT, often makes headlines. But differences among members have kept such ambitions from materializing. Still, the message is consistent. The world is moving toward multipolarity, and India is no longer just participating, it is shaping the conversation. The 2025 SCO Summit made one thing undeniable. When Modi stood alongside Putin and Xi, the image spoke louder than speeches. Here was India, once pressured to choose between Washington and Moscow, now holding its ground as an independent pole in global politics. For decades, global affairs were described as bipolar, US versus the Soviet Union, or unipolar, with America alone at the top. But today, multipolarity is the word of the moment, and India is not just part of that change. India is driving it. The United States may view India as unreliable. China may see it as a rival. Russia may see it as a friend. But in all cases, the world sees India as unavoidable. All of this unfolded against the backdrop of a storm. Donald Trump's return to the White House had sent shockwaves through international trade. His administration had imposed a 50% tariff on Indian goods, a punishment for India's decision to keep importing Russian crude oil despite Western sanctions. Factories in India slowed down. Exporters felt the squeeze. Towns that relied on foreign markets grew nervous. What was described in Washington as strategy felt in India like betrayal. But if Trump's move was meant to isolate India, it had the opposite effect. Instead of pushing New Delhi into a corner, it brought India closer to other powers: Russia, China, Central Asia, and the global South. In Tianjin, this new alignment was on full display. Modi, Putin, and Xi Jinping were seen laughing, shaking hands, and projecting an image of unity. For the first time in years, India was at the heart of a stage where the West was not the main audience. So what is the SCO? To understand the importance of this summit, one must look back. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization did not begin as a grand alliance. It was born in the 1990s when the collapse of the Soviet Union created chaos across Eurasia. China suddenly found itself with four new neighbors: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Russia. Together, these five countries created what was then called the Shanghai Five. The focus was modest: demilitarize borders, reduce tensions, and prevent instability. But as the years passed, threats multiplied. The rise of terrorism, fueled by turmoil in Afghanistan, gave the grouping new urgency. In 2001, Uzbekistan joined, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO, was formally born. It created an anti-terror unit known as RATS and slowly built an agenda that stretched from security to economics to education. Today, the SCO is massive. It covers roughly a quarter of the world's landmass, about 40% of the global population, and more than a third of global GDP in purchasing power terms. India and Pakistan joined in 2017. Iran followed in 2023. Belarus became the latest member in 2024. What started as a border arrangement has now become one of the largest regional blocs in the world. So when Modi and Putin embraced in Tianjin, it was not just a gesture of friendship. It was the visual representation of India's new reality, a nation that will not be bullied, isolated, or forced into anyone's camp. India will talk to America when it must. It will stand with Russia when it chooses. It will confront China when it needs to. And it will always keep its people, its sovereignty, and its future at the center. The world may try to write India's role as secondary, but moments like these prove that India is no longer following someone else's script. It is writing its own. The question is, as India steps into this defining decade, will the world finally recognize it not just as a balancing power, but as a leading power?